it looks like the motive, if I'm reading the tea leaves correctly, is not anti-Semitism, but revenge. David Menzies for Rebel News here in North Toronto. And folks, I'm standing outside the Ontario Court of Justice, and it was to take in the latest hearing of an individual by the name of Mark Anthony de la Cruz. Now, if that name rings a bell, this is the person who Toronto police charged with arson last month. Allegedly, Mr. de la Cruz tried to burn down the Leo Baeck Day School back on July the 30th. Now, it wasn't much of an appearance. As a matter of fact, Mr. de la Cruz was not here in person, nor was he on a Zoom link. Rather, the duty council asked for an adjournment request for a bench warrant. As well, it was mentioned that Mr. de la Cruz's lawyer is awaiting on more disclosure. So the next appearance has been pushed forward till September the 3rd. Now, here's what I can tell you, folks, regarding this case. As you know, unfortunately, since October of last year, Jewish businesses and Jewish schools and Jewish places of worship, they have been targeted by vandals and arsonists based on the Middle East conflict. It's absolutely shameful. But the interesting thing here is that the police do not believe this to be a hate crime. Now, by way of background, de la Cruz is a homeless person, or as the police refer to him, an unhoused person. I guess that's the new politically correct terminology. And he was living in a shed on school property. And at one point, the school had enough of this, and they removed his belongings from the shed. So, according to police in a statement, on July 30th at approximately 3:30, the suspect returned to the shed to find his belongings removed and was then observed leaving the shed. And shortly after, a fire starts in which the fire and heat resulted in damage to the shed and broke several of the school's windows. So, in other words, it looks like the motive, if I'm reading the tea leaves correctly, is not anti-Semitism, but revenge. Maybe de la Cruz was simply furious with the school for taking his belongings, and he decided to strike back with an arson attempt. But nevertheless, what I personally find disturbing is that attacks on Jewish-owned structures, it seems to be a bit of a nothing burger these days. It's just the new normal. It's very reminiscent of a few years ago when more than 100 Christian churches were desecrated by either vandalism, graffiti, or arson, even burnt to the ground. And what was the outcry? Well, consider what Prime Minister Justin Trudeau's best friend had to say about it. Gerald Butt said it was understandable. Understandable? Why?
One of my reflections is I understand the anger that's out there against the federal government, against institutions like the Catholic Church. It is real, and it is fully understandable given the shameful history that we're all becoming more and more aware of.
Well, the reason was the alleged mass graves at residential schools, something that has turned out to be an outright hoax. But regardless, to Gerald Butts and his ilk, this is understandable. And likewise, I wonder to the likes of the Justin Trudeau Liberals, given their anti-Israel policies, is the desecration of Jewish places of worship and Jewish schools and Jewish businesses, is that understandable as well? And this is not conjecture, folks. Case in point, Yara Sachs, the Canadian-Israeli Jew, who represents the riding of York Centre, which is just a stone's throw away from the riding in which the arson attempt took place at this school. Well, earlier this year, she flew all the way to the Middle East to shake hands with a terrorist, Mahmoud Abbas. And Mr. Abbas is the person who runs a pay-for-slay operation. If you try to kill or succeed in killing an Israeli, you're going to get a financial reward. If you die trying, your family will get the check. What in blue hell was Yara Sachs thinking of making that visit, especially since she's not the prime minister, she's not the foreign affairs minister. So in the final analysis, another Jewish building set aflame. So many on the left just shrug their shoulders and say there's nothing to see here. And by the way, there were no other media outlets in the court today. It's just too inconsequential for them to cover. Well, I say no, we're going to follow this trial. We're going to see if this is indeed a matter of revenge, or if Mr. Dela Cruz harbors anti-Semitic sentiment. Stay tuned. We'll be back here on the day after Labor Day. For Rebel News, I'm David the Menzoid Menzies. Hey folks, I know you love it when Rebel News tells you the other side of the story, and let's face it, there was no other media here today at the court to cover the firebombing of a Jewish day school. But you know, we need your help. Can you please go to rebelfieldreports.com? That's rebelfieldreports.com. And if you're able to, kindly make a donation, because unlike the mainstream media, which is clearly not interested in this case, we rely on donations to bring you our journalism, not taxpayer-funded corporate welfare. Thanks so much.